Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome along to today's webinar. We're looking at running the month-end option in CH50 accounts. Session today should last around about 45 minutes, plenty of time for the demos that we need to run through, and hopefully we'll be able to pick up your questions along the way as well. So today I am being joined by Abby, Jackie, and Tina, who will be on hand to answer any questions. And speaking of questions, a little bit of housekeeping just before we get started. So how you can keep them busy today. First of all, if you've got a microphone, which you don't need, but if you've got one, it will be muted. It will be done automatically for you. You'll find a can't unmute yourself during the session today. You can submit your questions. So if you have any questions for us, you'll be able to pop them into the questions panel. So you should see that in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. You can't currently see that. All you need to do, that little icon on your toolbar, the one that looks like the speech bubble containing the question mark, just give it a click. It'll expand the panel, and in the bottom box, you should then see that. There is a handout or a copy of the slides that you can download, which accompanies today's session, so that's available to you as well. It's also available after the session as well, so if you do feel you want to come back to it and get a copy of that handout, we're now making those available along with the top questions and answers from today's session. We'll make those available later today as well. To access those, you will just watch out for your follow-up email, which you receive round about an hour after we finish today. So that will be an automated email. There is finally an option to switch to full screen mode as well. Just so when I'm sharing my screen in the session today, you may find it beneficial just to switch to full screen mode to make things just that little bit bigger. Right, let's have a look at what we're covering. So a little bit of a revamp session from when we've run this one previously. So there is already a recording of when we've run it previously, just in case anyone needs to disappear, but there will be a recording of today's session as well. So a little bit of background as to what the month end actually is, maybe what it means to you as well, because it will mean different things for different businesses. We're going to look at preparation steps as well. So what's involved? What do you need to do? We're then going to look at actually running the month-end option in CH50 accounts. So what does that actually look like? We'll pick up on some post-month-end tasks. So after you've maybe done your preparation, if you need to, you've then run the month-end, what's then involved? And we're going to have a bit of a recap on some of the common questions that I'm going to cover at the beginning of the session as well. Just at the end, I'll explain more about the additional support, but as normal, obviously plenty of information available in the Help Center, probably a lot more detailed than what I'm going to go into today. And obviously our support team is on hand as well. Right, so first of all, I'm going to run a quick poll just before we start running through the demo. So let's quickly launch that. So nice simple question, do you currently run the month-end option? Do you use that within your software? Just give me a simple yes or no. So I'll just give you a chance to vote for that one. So I'm specifically not talking about just do you have a month end and do you run reports, things like that. We're talking about do you actually use the month end option? So I'll just let that run through and I'll wait a decent percentage of you voted and then I'll share the results with you as well. Excellent, that's great. So let me just close the poll at that point. So I've got about 74% of you voted there. So let me just share the results. So as you can see, the majority of you don't currently use the month-end option. And you never know, that might be where you go away from the webinar today, thinking exactly the same. I don't need to run that. And that is, believe it or not, one of the common questions. So let's get started with the webinar itself. Okay, so what is the month end and what does it mean to you? So is it just a point in time? You get to the end of your month and you put some adjustments, you run some reports. Is it as simple as that? Do you currently run the month end routine? So about 86% of you said you don't actually run the month end option itself. So that's what we're going to look at today, the month end option. Is it worth you running it? Do you need to? So you do have the month end option. The idea of that is that it will help you to process and automate specific postings. So it doesn't do a lot, and you'll see that in the session today. Now there is a if you've downloaded the handouts as well, I've included some of the links, which you'll easily find this information anyway if you go to the Help Centre. But these green buttons that are included on the slides, if you've downloaded that, the PDF copy of the slides, those links will work for you and you'll find out more information about things like running month end. I want to mention some of the common questions though, just in case you're about to type some of these in as well. And we've had a couple of questions along these themes already. So do I have to run a month end? That's what we're going to establish in today's session. Probably not for the vast majority of you. You don't have to run that month end option. If you do, when do you run a month end? Do you have to wait till you hit that end of month and run it there and then, or do you continue and come back and running whenever you're ready? What if you haven't run one so far? That's quite a common one as well. That might be one you're thinking. So you never know, you might attend the webinar today and think, actually, I should be running one. But what if I haven't run one so far? What do I do? Can I just start? That links in with that fourth question as well. Can you start partway through the year? What if you've missed a month? What do you do then? And another common one, this is quite a common thing that will be, we find on a number of webinars, including the year-end session as well, is if you haven't run a year-end yet, could you continue as normal? Can I run a month end into my new year? In the vast majority of instances, I probably can't think of any, you just continue as normal. Let me just get that one out there. Just continue as normal. You come back to run a month end or a year end as and when you're ready. So run your month ends into the new financial year. You might be 6 months into that new financial year. You might have run a number of month ends. And then if you need to, you can go back and run that year end as and when you're ready. And that's no different for the month ends as well. Continue entering your transactions as normal. If you need to run one, you would come back and run that as and when you are ready to do so. That's the same for VAT returns. So a question from Melanie there. Quarterly VAT return, can a month end be run on a quarterly basis? Not the month end itself. The month end is monthly based. So that's the frequency for that one. I think the clue for that one is in the title of the option there, Melanie. Right, anyway, we'll have a bit of a recap on those questions at the end, just in case you've got those questions and you think, ooh, I didn't quite pick it up from the session. Now, the month-end option itself, it contains 5 key options. There's the clear month-to-date turnover option, which is available in all levels of the software when you access the month-end option. There's the lock date option, again, available in all levels of the software. And then you also have the option to process your prepayments, accruals, and if you use the fixed assets register, you have the option to process the depreciation when you run the month end. Now, the prepayments, accruals, and depreciation options are only available to you if you're on the professional level of the software. So if you're on Essentials or just the standard level, then the only options you have available to you when you're going through the month end option is 1, to clear the month-to-date turnover, and secondly, to set or amend the lock date. Now, bearing in mind, you can set that lock date when you run a month end, a year end, or just by going into the settings menu. If that's the only reason you're running a month end, then don't bother. You can just go into the settings menu and set that lock date. But we'll be running through these options just to give you an idea of what they actually relate to in today's session. Now, I mentioned I've amended the webinar from when I've run it previously. So some of the options we've either run a webinar on previously, so I'm not going to go through them in detail. And some of the other options, prepayments, accruals, and depreciation, we've actually got webinars booked or scheduled in. So rather than me run through those options in detail, I would encourage you to sign up for those individual webinars so you can learn about those options. Right, let's go through it. Now, just before we run through the demo, just want to quickly mention preparation. So what's involved in preparing for your month end? So month end, you generally think of month end as a point when you run a series of reports, and that's the post year end, post month end tasks. So preparing for your month end, really it's just about making sure that all of your processing is complete for that period. which is why you'll probably never just get to your month end and run your month end straight away. You probably go so far into the next period or even beyond, and then come back just to make sure that everything has been posted. But common things that maybe people forget about is things like processing your recurring entries, making sure that your invoices or orders have been updated, journals, so posting adjustments such as opening, closing stock. Now, there's not a definitive list. Some of you will use some areas, some will use all areas, some will use others. So create yourself a checklist, just as a reminder of what you need to post. It's probably the best tip I'll give you, that one. Create yourself a checklist. Now, assuming you've processed everything and you think, right, I need to run the month end, what does it look like? That's what we're going to run through now. So we're going to access the month end option via Tools, Period End, Month End. It'll bring up the screen that I've got on the slide there. We'll come back. Obviously, we'll go live in the software in just a moment. And it's split into 3 sections. And I'm going to run through those 3 sections just to explain what the options relate to. So let me share my screen at that point. If I can find the right button. There we go. And you should now be able to see my desktop. So we're in Sage 50 Cloud Accounts. Now I am using the professional level. So I mentioned earlier about what options were available to you. So I'll obviously point out the differences as we go through the options. Now to access the month end, we're going to go into, as I say, Tools, Period End, and then Month End. Just need to, obviously you're probably going to get this on quite a few of these options. Just mentions it needs to close other windows to access the option. Do you want to continue? So I'm just going to click yes, and it launches that month end window. So this is the equivalent of what you just saw on the slide just a moment ago. So split into 3 sections: prepare for month end options, and the final summary at the bottom, the run month end. So we'll just quickly work through these, explaining what they are, what they relate to, what it means to you. So the first option, check your data. Now you'll probably be doing this regularly anyway, but you have an option to do it from this screen. So check your data. I'm going to let mine run through because mine is very quick. Obviously, you might have a massive set of data, which you might take 5 minutes here and there, or you've possibly even longer to let that run through. But it is just as normal. Just give it a click. It'll start running through. Obviously, mine's nearly instantaneous. Relatively tiny set of data that I'm using today. But it tells me no problems to report on the data files. So I'll just OK that. Obviously, checking your data, it's something that you should be doing regularly if you aren't already. If any errors, warnings, or comments were found, you could just simply click through the relevant tabs down the left-hand side, and it would tell you what the warning, the error, warning, or comment relates to. If you had any of those as well, you would have a little link appear at the bottom, and it means that you can click that to find out what it actually relates to, and if anything, what you need to do about that. But no problems on mine. So I'll just close that. It takes me back to that month end screen. Take a backup. Again, something you should be doing regularly if you aren't already. Might be the last task that you follow at the end of each day. So take a backup. Make sure you include your data files. The other options, really, they are optional. Now, you might want to take an all files backup. You might do that as maybe as part of maybe as part of your month end, or definitely as part of your year end. You back up absolutely everything, but on a normal basis, you would probably back up your data files only. And I'm just going to call mine pre-month end, and I'll put the date in as well. So I'm going to run the October month end in today's session. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put that, I'll just save it to my desktop. OK that, let it run through. Again, relatively tiny set of data that I'm using today, so really, really quick. Tells me the backup has been successful. So no surprises so far. Now this option, you may or may not have revaluation. If anyone uses the foreign trader option, where you can essentially set up foreign currencies, you can set up customers in a foreign currency, suppliers, bank accounts, you can invoice in foreign currencies and be invoiced in foreign currencies, then if you've got that enabled, you will at some point have set up foreign currency bank accounts. Now, as prior to you running the month end, we always recommend that you would revalue your foreign currency bank accounts. This is something that you can do outside of the month end wizard. So you can do it from within the banking screen. You have an option to revalue any foreign currency bank accounts. It will not be listed if you haven't enabled the foreign trader option. So just, again, follow those through if you need to. If you haven't already done them, of course. You may have checked your data and backed up prior to coming into this screen. Next, it asks you to set the month end date. So what's the last day of the month that you want to run the month end for? And a question from Shelna there, which I think Abby's just picked up, asking, does it default to the last month? It actually defaults to the last day of the current month that you're in. I'm never quite sure why it doesn't default to the last day of the previous month, because that's more likely what you want to run. So just need to set that back. So 31st of October. And when I press the tab key, you'll see at the top there, it changes to October 22. Obviously, even though I'm in the month of November, I might need to be running the September month end at this stage. So we'll set it to the last day of the month that you want to run that month end for. Next is the option that refers to the lock date. Now, some of you may have been on the lock date webinar. So the idea of setting a lock date is that you can control who can and can't backdate transactions prior to the date that you set. So if I'm running the month end for, let's say for October, and then obviously I'm going to be running reports, etc. Am I at the stage where I think, right, I don't want anyone backdating transactions into the month of October or amending transactions that would then impact on maybe my management reports? So that's where the lock date would come in. You can pick and choose. Obviously, you can choose your date. So in this case, what I would do is I'm going to set mine to the 1st of November. So once I've run this month end, I'm thinking, right, I don't want anyone amending or backdating transactions or even deleting transactions that are dated prior to the 1st of November. Now your lock date, as I mentioned, there is a recorded webinar on that one, so link will be included so you can access that one. It'll be included on your follow-up email. But you can also set that lock date either just by going into the settings menu, or when you run a month end or a year end, you get the same options. So if that's the only reason you were running month end, you don't need to run a month end. You don't need to come in to do this. Next option is to set your month-to-date turnover to 0 on each customer and supplier record. So basically, you now have the list of options. What do you want to process as part of that month end? Now, excuse me, you can pick and choose which options you want to process at this stage. Now, remember, the prepayments, accruals, and the depreciation of your fixed assets, you'll only have those available to you, those options, if you are on the professional level of the software. So when we looked at that table earlier, that was where we mentioned those options. If you're on essentials or standard, you'll go down as far as this option here. So the ability to set your lock date and the option to set your month-to-date turnovers to 0. Now, by ticking this option, what does it mean? Setting your month-to-date turnover to 0 on each customer and supplier record. Well, I'm just going to cancel out and show you what it relates to. If we go into customers, and we'll just pick on this customer that I've got. And if I go onto the sales tab, we've got this MTD box here at the top. so month to date. Now, this relates to the month to date turnover. Now, it's not strictly the month to date. It's essentially, it's a counter, this one. So it'll start accumulating the turnover figures from any sales since you either last run a month end or since you last run a year end. If you've never run a month end before, it'll be since you last run that the year end option. So what it's saying is, do you want to reset this figure to 0? That's what that little tick box relates to. Now, if you tick the box, it will zero down that balance against all customers and all suppliers. There are very few reports that would bring this value through. And it's also a figure, generally, I would advise you not to rely on, just in case you've done something like this. So if I delete what's there, and I do 2,500, and save that record, it does mean if I call up that record again, go into sales, it's now got that value there. So the only time you would normally type in that value is maybe if you're going to use that figure, and probably when you first maybe set up some opening balances, for instance. The only time you would really use that, but do be aware that it could potentially be over-typed. And that 2,500 that I've just entered there means it's not driven by transaction values then at that point. I've got no way of checking where that value come from. So do be careful if you're using that value. You're much better off using reports like a day book report or a turnover period and year to date report to actually calculate the turnover the period you need, rather than just come in and rely on this figure. So that's what it's relating to. From a supplier side, if we go into suppliers, just pick on a one. Go into the purchased tab, you've got a similar option at the top, MTD. And again, it'll just build up over or start counting and accumulating, calculating that value from the point when it was last reset to 0, which is either at month end if you tick the box or as part of your year end. So same position. If I needed to, I could overwrite that. Right. Okay. So that's the first option we want to discuss in detail. Let's go back to the month end option. So tools, period end, month end. I'm just going to set that date back one more time. Make sure it says got the relevant month and year at the top. So that's essentially the date that I want to run the month end, the lock date, and the ability to reset the month to date turnover options. Now, if you don't use those options, and bear in mind what I've just said about that month to date turnover. So if you're not bothered about resetting it, you're not using that value. Bearing in mind also that you can set the lock date elsewhere in the software. And also, if you're using essentials and the standard level of the software, that's as far really. Those are the only options that you have as far as the month-end window is concerned. You don't have the prepayments, accruals, or fixed assets. So if that's the case, then you don't need to run that month-end option. It doesn't do anything else. It doesn't lock a period down. It doesn't open the next period. It's not going to post any additional transactions. So in that instance, you wouldn't need to run the month-end option itself. And probably going back to that poll that we run at the beginning, where the majority of you said, the 86% of you voted saying that you didn't currently run the month-end option, you're probably still in the same position. You don't necessarily need to run that month-end. Now, the next options, the prepayments, accruals, they are very similar, these options. Obviously, it's more accounting adjustments. Now, these options, prepayments and accruals, if you're on the professional level, you have an option within nominal codes called prepayments and accruals. And basically, when you set your prepayments and accruals up in this area and you go to obviously save your changes, it will actually prompt you. Let me just change this one. So when you save it, it'll tell you, an information box will pop up saying these payments are only posted to the ledgers when the month-end option is run. So if you do run or use the accruals or prepayments option, you've got anything set up within that, then you must run a month-end to process those entries. If you don't, nothing will happen with the entry that you've got entered there. Accruals is pretty much the same. Obviously, just a different kind of adjustment, the way it posts the journals. And again, if I just adjust something on that accrual window and save the changes, you'll see that again, I get the same option or the same message. So if I'm using accruals or prepayments, you've got to run that month end so you can tick the box to make those postings. Let's go back in one last time. So we'll into month end. Again, I'm just going to set that date back. The final option I want to mention to you today is the final option here, include depreciation of fixed assets. So this relates to the fixed assets register, which is this option that you can see on my toolbar down the left-hand side. So again, only available on the professional level of the software. And if you set fixed assets up in there, the idea is you'll depreciate them on a monthly basis. And rather than you manually enter depreciation values, normally as a journal, it will do it for you. It will do it as part of that month-end option, as long as you tick the box. So again, if you've set up fixed assets, that's when you would need to run a month-end. So if you use any of these options, prepayments, accruals, or the fixed assets ledger, you've got to run the month-end to make the postings. If you don't use these options, then you don't need to run the month-end option. There is no benefit to running that month-end in your account unless you want to, unless of course you want to clear down those turnover figures which we've already discussed. Now, if I just tick all of these boxes, make sure I've got the right month and year set at the top. Just bear me 1 second there. Apologies about that. Just getting messages and everything popping up in the background. So we've got all the options ticked. We've taken the backup. We've checked the data. I'm going to ignore revaluation. We'll save that for another time, I think. I think off the top of my head, there is a recorded webinar on that one. I think I've seen someone mention that one from earlier on. So check out the recordings, and that should be recorded in the foreign trader option, the recorded webinar. So anyway, we've got the date set, we've got the options ticked, we've got the summary at the bottom. That's all that shows, the run month end box. Just tells me running month end for October 2022 tells me it's going to set the lock date, it's going to clear the turnover, post prepayments, accruals, post fixed asset depreciation based on the options that I've selected. All I need to do at that point is click run month end, just click yes. It tells me the month end process for October 2022 has been completed. Are you okay with that? And that's it done. So it's a really quick option, that one. If you were thinking it was going to take as long as maybe running a year end, no. It's just about instant, that one. It's very little that it needs to do. Excuse me. So that's the month end option. Pop back to the slides. Now we're going to have a recap on some of those questions that we mentioned at the beginning, just to almost like spell out the answers to you. Post month end tasks. What do you need to do? What's involved? Well, basically, it's all about generating your month end reports. Now, if you don't need to run a month end or the month end option, you'll probably just post. Essentially, what a month end would mean to you is posting, making sure you've got all your processing done, and you might run some month end reports. There's not a definitive list on reports that you should run, by the way, just in case you're about to ask that one. So It's not a list, right? You must run a trial balance. You must run a profit and loss balance sheet. If you need advice on that one, speak to your accountant. They'll tell you, if anything, what they want you to run. There is a batch reporting option. I'll quickly mention that one. Batch reporting isn't available in the essentials level of the software, but it is available in standard and professional. Batch reporting, the idea behind this one is if there's a standard set of reports that you run as part of your procedure, so month end being a common one where you might run a trial balance, a profit and loss, a balance sheet, an age debtors, age creditors, and maybe some other reports. Those reports, rather than run one report, wait for it to generate, then the next one, then the next one, you can just create a batch report and say, right, I want to run this batch of reports, and it will generate them all simultaneously. Just let it get on with it at that point. Really useful if your reports, if you've got a big set of data and your reports generally take a while to generate. Just set them going as one. There is a recorded webinar on that one is available as well. Quite a short one, that one, because it's quite a simple feature, but again, could be a good time saver for you. So generate your month-end reports. Then, if anything, check your data, take another backup. That's it. Nothing much more to it. Now let's have a bit of a recap on those questions that I mentioned at the beginning. So first of all, do you have to run a month end? No is the answer to that one, unless you have accruals, prepayments, and fixed asset records set up, in which case you do need to run the month end because that's how it processes those transactions. Obviously, you've always got the option to things like prepayments, accruals, and depreciation. You can just post those manually if you want to, just as manual journals. So ignoring the automated options, and then you wouldn't need to run that month end either. So probably for the vast majority, you've come along today, you've seen the month end. And actually, I've got a poll on this one. So let me just load the other poll. I'll quickly launch that one and just let me know. So do you think you will run a month end after today's session? So based on what you've learned today, do you think you're going to change? The vast majority clicked no when we asked at the beginning. I would imagine we're probably going to get similar results. So just let me know if you're likely to actually start running there, either continuing if you already are, or are you going to start running it? So again, I'll just wait till I get a decent percentage of you sending or haven't voted. I'll share the results for you. If you're still not sure as well after today's session and you want to discuss that, if you're in a position where you think, well, I've watched the webinar and I'm still not sure, should I start running the month end or not? If you're still in that position, speak to our support team. Right, let me just close that. And let me just share the results with you as well. So we've still got 63% of you saying, right, I'm not going to be running a month end. So even if nothing else today, you've learned that probably that you don't need to run that month end. For those of you that, yes, I assume that you're on the professional level and that you are actually using the accruals, prepayments, or the fixed assets register. Right, let's just hide that. So just going back to the questions, do you have to run the month end? Just to recap on that one, answer is no, unless you use those final three options that we mentioned. When should you run a month end? Basically, as and when you're ready. What if you haven't run one so far? Well, the options or the month end option, it's all about processing those accruals, prepayments, or the depreciation. So how far back do you need that to go? Can you start partway through the year? Yes, you can, as long as you don't need to backdate the accruals, prepayments, or fixed asset depreciation. If you do need to backdate it, then you can set those up, and then you would start running older periods. What if you've missed a month? Well, in that situation, it depends which of the options you use. So let's say you'd processed your August month end if you do need to run one, you'd forgot about September, and then you've subsequently processed the October month end, what about September? It depends what options you use. If you are in that position, get in touch with our support team and they'll discuss that with you. And that final question, one that we covered in a little bit of detail at the beginning, I haven't run a year end yet. Can I run a month end into what will be my new financial year? Yes, just as normal. Continue your processing as normal. Your year end is not going to impact on that one. It's quite common to go 3 to 6 months into your new financial year before you come back and run that year end. So quick summary, month end is a feature, but it is an optional task. And it only needs to be run, again, I feel like I'm repeating myself time and time again, but it only needs to be run if you use any of those 3 options. If you don't, then you don't have to. But the month end option, obviously, it does simplify those processes, removing the need to post manual journals for accruals, prepayments, and fixed assets. Again, remember, we've got those webinars planned in for prepayments and accruals and a separate one for the fixed assets. Help Center links, again, if you've downloaded the slides for today, which you can do via that link on your toolbar. These green buttons will work for you. They'll take you to the relevant articles, but they are easy to find from within the Help Center anyway. A little bit of a plug for Sage membership. If you've attended any webinars recently as well, you'll be familiar with these ones. But Sage membership, if you've not heard about that, brings together a number of key areas of the services that we offer. So Sage University, it's where we host all of our e-learning courses and our online training, our certification options. You've got Sage City. You may or may not have heard of Sage City, but we're starting to use it as part of the webinar service now as well. So there's forums, blogs, advice, questions, answers, all in there. But it's also where you'll now find the top questions and answers from the session, from the webinars. We host those in there, as well as the ability to download the handouts for the sessions as well. So you may start to engage with that a little bit more here and there. And also Sage Masterclasses. Masterclasses are videos that we have available via the Masterclass area of our website, all to do with general business advice. So season 1, the video is all about finding and keeping great people. Season 2 is all about productivity. So business advice rather than advice on using your software. So you've got that available as well, all included in Sage membership, all free to access. For the webinars as well, if you're new to webinars, I hope you've enjoyed it today. If you have attended them before, welcome back, and I hope you keep coming for more sessions as well. Tomorrow we'll be running another webinar on, sorry, not tomorrow, next week I should say. We've got a number of webinars planned in. So we'll be looking at report design. We're starting to ramp up the coverage of that a little bit. So Tina will be covering groups and sorts as part of the report design courses that we're going to be running next Tuesday. We're covering CIS, the domestic reverse charge. That will be on Wednesday. We've got journals coming up. We're going to be looking at using the letters option, prepayments and accruals, as I mentioned in today's session, fixed assets, and also we've got a series of credit control webinars planned in as well. If you want to sign up for any of those, watch out for your follow-up email. It will include the link that you need, not only to register for the live sessions, but you'll be able to access the recordings as well. If you've got any requests of areas you'd like to maybe see covered going forward, excuse me. So any requests, there'll be a little survey pop up as you leave today. Just pop it on there. Or you can reply to any of your webinar emails with your requests, and that will be directed direct to me. That follow-up email with the links that you need, it will be with you in, I can't remember if it's 1 or 2 hours time, but watch out for it. Now that brings us to the end of the session. Just going to hang on for another few minutes just while we finish up the last few questions. If you've got any, please pop them in there. We'll try and pick up as many as we can. But let me quickly take a moment to thank you for your time, for coming along. I hope you have found it useful. For some of you, You might be learning brand new stuff, a lot to take in. Remember, there's recording available if you need a bit of a recap. For others, you may have just been coming along for just a bit of reassurance that what you understand about a certain feature, or something along those lines. You just got that reassurance that your understanding of it is correct. So whichever category, I hope you found it useful today. Little survey pops up as you leave the session. If you can take a minute to complete that, share some thoughts, ideas, any other feedback with us, that'd be great. And follow-up email, as I mentioned, you get that roundabout. I think it's about an hour's time it's scheduled for. You're about to leave. Many thanks for coming along. Take care, stay safe, and hopefully we'll see you again. If anyone wants to hang around for additional questions, pop them in there. And as I say, we've got Abby, Jackie, and Tina on hand, and myself now, to try and pick up any questions that you might have. Quick question from Kate there. I'll pick that one up. So Kate's just asking, can depreciation be calculated by the system? The idea of calculating depreciation for you, that's where the fixed assets register comes in, Kate. So we touched on that briefly today, the fixed assets, but remember, we've got that webinar coming up in a few weeks' time. So get yourself registered and we'll cover that one in a bit more detail. If you're not using the fixed assets register, which is only available at the professional level of the software, then depreciation would be entered just as a manual journal. So you would need to calculate that manually yourself, and then just be a case of popping that in. Right, question from Geraldine, which I'll also pick up. Geraldine's just saying, don't use the period end option at the moment. We just run from May to April. Would you advise that we start? So if we're talking about the month end option, Geraldine, if you don't, again, if I must emphasize this bit, if you don't use the prepayments accruals options, which are within the nominal codes area, so those automated options, or the fixed assets option, then you don't need to start running that month end. It's not going to benefit you running the option itself. It's only if you use those options that you need to run a month end to automatically process the transactions from those options. So you don't, if you haven't run it so far, you probably don't need to start. If anything changes though and you're not sure, get in touch with our support team. Right, questions are starting to dry up, so we'll end the webinar just at that point. So many thanks for coming along, and thanks to the team again for answering any questions that you've had along the way. I see you've kept them really busy today. So hope you've enjoyed it. Take care, stay safe, and hopefully we'll see you on some other sessions. Many thanks.